One. I am talking today to Joanne Gilbert, or Joanne D. Gilbert is on your website. So Joanne is an author, an educator, and also a public speaker. Really, her field of well, and let's call the field of expertise is it's the Holocaust, and especially women as well in Holocaust, and not just victims, but women who helped victims. But because you have two books called Women of Valor, so. But I'm gonna let you explain those stories. But just in a nutshell, who is Joanne D. Gilbert?
Okay, thank you. It is my pleasure to be here and to help spread the stories of women and young girls who successfully defied the Nazis. Their stories are not very widely known, and that's affected the narrative of Jewish Holocaust history for just about 80 years, where Jews are perceived and portrayed as victims, and the rest of the narrative needs to be told that the Jews were also fierce fighters and successful fighters, and they did not go silently like sheep to the slaughter. The women that I have focused on and who have become my dear friends were teenagers and one little girl who fought the Nazis in a variety of ways, and after liberation picked up their lives and went on and led long, loving, and productive lives well into old age. They became teachers, artists, some were in show business. They did not let the horror of what they experienced change the rest of their lives, and relegate them to horror. They never forgot. They all spoke to schools and organizations. They were all committed to Holocaust education. But just as they did when they were young and in the partisans or couriers or spies, they kept their eyes on the prize. They did what had to be done, and they also moved forward with their lives. And one of them, my first, when I was talking with her, I used the word hero. And I said, "Well, have you felt like a hero?" And she, took umbrage and said, "I'm not a hero."
Hmm.
And every time I think of anybody that I saved, I think of 100 that I wasn't able to save. And when I asked that question of others, they all had the same answer. Not one of these women ever felt like a hero. They all carried sorrow for the people they weren't able to save. Now, to get to your question, how did I get to this topic? I am a child of the residue of the Holocaust. I'm a first line American baby boomer. And so when I was born, we were touching history every day. Our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors, everyone we knew in some way either firsthand experienced it or were related to people who experienced it. So while my peers in communities that were not Jewish were growing up with howdy doody and hula hoops and uh, finished basements with ping pong tables, we also were growing up with this miasma, this cloud of the Holocaust. It was part of our daily existence.
Hmm.
We didn't associate with anything German, and we lived for our relatives who had died. I see a question on your face. Did you have a point?
No, not a question, but this is so typical. I've heard this from so many others, especially children from Holocaust survivors or grandchildren of Holocaust. That
Yeah.
cloud that's hanging over them,
Always.
that dark cloud, there's always that history behind them that never goes away, that keeps coming back and back. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's I hear that so often from survivors, but also from the children and grandchildren.
Yes. And I am not a child or grandchild of survivors. I am the great granddaughter of a victim. We don't have a particular category. So my grandmother and grandfather got out in time and never forgave themselves.
Yeah.
They should have died with their families. And so my great grandmother, my aunts and uncles, cousins, they were in Vilna, Lithuania, which was a brutal place. The Litvaks were almost in competition with the Germans to see who could be the most cruel.
And
And
sometimes they would win.
yeah, exactly. And I grew up with my grandmother's photo albums. Since she got out earlier, she didn't come as a refugee. She wasn't in the bowels of a ship with other terrified refugees. She came with the earlier wave of Eastern European Jewish immigrants. They were getting away from, but not fleeing, Russia, Soviet Union, and the pogroms. Well, it wasn't Soviet Union yet, right? It was about 1905. But the Russians were drafting Jewish boys as young as 12 to go fight the interminable Russo-Japanese wars.
Yeah.
And so it behooved Jewish families to get out, not dreaming of what horror was coming. And so they got out in the usual way. One would come to the States, work hard as a peddler, get a better job, better income, bring another one across. And my grandmother's ticket was paid for by my future grandfather, who had already fallen in love with her back in Vilna and invited her to come join him in the States. And if she felt like it, marry him.
Well,
But no,
that's well, that's I mean, love conquers all, they say. But you made a good point there, and I think that's not. Actually, I wasn't really aware of this myself. The Russo-Japanese War in 1905. I didn't realize that as so many young Jewish soldiers or children were drafted as soldiers. I think when you go back, that kind of makes sense in a way as well. So, but I think that's often forgotten in the whole narrative of the Holocaust as well, I think.
yeah, it's not even known to be forgotten.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that, and those wars were like a series of wars, and they kind of went on, and then uh, in the Pale of Settlement, in the shtetls, there were people that were draftable, and one of the things that families did, my family did, there was a ruling that if one of the young men in your family has already gone and possibly already been lost, um, then you didn't have to send another one. Part of that was that they would keep these soldiers for sometimes 25 years.
Hmm.
So if you went in at 15, your life was pretty much taken over. And so many families, mine included, changed their names so that they could have the name of a family who had already lost a son.
Okay, that's
And
interesting.
it is when you're into genealogy with a
Hmm.
lot of cultures, all you do is follow your name all the way back.
That's what I've been doing for the last couple of months because one of the reasons why I started uh, researching the Holocaust and World War II as well is because of my paternal grandfather. He was executed by the Nazis, but there might be another reason as well. I think he might have been driven to suicide. So there's a mystery around his death, and that's why I kind of started looking into it. But that also meant I had to do a bit of research into my family,
Yes.
and I've noticed that my family's name has changed a few times over the centuries. It went from Klein to Decline, then back to Decline. So, and I'm still not sure why that is. That's another puzzle, and that needs to be solved. But bit by
Yes.
bit,
Yeah.
it's coming up.
One of the connecting with the Netherlands, um, one of the most powerful moments, and it's hard to say most because I've had so many in doing my research, is when I went to the Amsterdam Zoo. And everyone knows about what was the zoo where they hid Jews, and it wasn't in Poland, the zookeeper's wife, in Warsaw. But people don't know there were other zoos in Europe
Yeah,
that hid Jews. And the Amsterdam Zoo was very, very active in that. And there's a beautiful restaurant at the gates of the zoo. It used to be like a greenhouse, I believe. And above it, in what we would call the attic, was like the central core of anti-Nazi Jewish resistance.
yeah,
And it was up there, and it was a secret. And then, of course, people got denounced, and it was destroyed. But there, these Dutch people, Dutch Jews, non-Jews, were functioning right above that horticultural space at the gate of the gorgeous, gorgeous zoo, which hid many Jews. And I went on a personal tour with one of the docents, and she took me to some of the exhibits and showed me where they had hidden Jews and how they took care of them in those exhibits.
yeah. I mean, it's well, actually, it's not that well known in the Netherlands even. It's actually more known abroad. Why? Well, there's a bit of a shadow over the Dutch involvement in the Holocaust. 75% of all Dutch Jews were murdered. Now, to be fair, the Dutch government has tried to deal with it as good as it could, and even the king has issued an apology. But there's always that kind of shame or not wanting to know what actually happened because, as I said, I grew up uh, a 20 minutes walk from the German border. And I grew up with a family that lived through the war, and all I was told all my life, all Germans were bad, all Dutch were good. Now, as years progressed, I found out that's not really the case. There's good and bad on all sides, and not only Germans, Dutch, French, Austrians. There's good and bad on all sides. Now, I think that's often forgotten also in the narrative of the Holocaust. That many, even Germans who had signed up to the Nazi Party because of whatever reason they for a job, they often risked their lives as well, hiding Jews, and the same with Dutch.
Yes.
So, well, just Corrie ten Boom, for instance, is such a beautiful
Yeah.
story, and the whole family, when you think of it, and her sister actually died because of helping not only Jews but also others.
Well, two, like 3 points that you just raised. Um, One, I'll start with Corrie ten Boom, was close friends with one of the women that I interviewed, Diet
Yeah,
Emin,
yeah,
who became just at maybe 13 with her little blonde braids, riding her bike, saving and hiding Jews, um, and then ending up being sent to prison. And as soon as she got out of prison, she went right back to the underground. And the other another Dutch Jewish woman, Mirjam Oringer, and I became very close. And she was in a resistance from the Jewish point of view. And so what I learned was very often even a Nazi, a brutal Nazi, could be hiding Jews at the same time. Nothing was just one way or the other. One of my Polish Jewish families, um, the they were about to be deported from their ghetto, and it turned out that one of them had Hungarian citizenship, a fluke. She was born at her grandmother's house in a territory that was Hungarian. And so one of the German clerks saved her because of that and brought her out of the ghetto and into the office of the commandant. And this was Lola in my book, Lola Lieber. And she was like 16, and she assumed she was going to be raped, murdered, tortured. And everybody, her family thought so too. And when she got to the commandant's office, which was now in a former Jewish doctor's beautiful home that had
Yeah.
been confiscated, he treated her respectfully. He took her the star band off, and he chatted with her, and she thought, what a sicko, he's being nice to me before he kills me, this is really twisted. But it turns out that this commandant had been helping Jews all along,
Yeah.
and he not only gave her the exit materials she needed, and she said, but my whole family's Hungarian. And what 16-year-old would have the presence of mind? And so he gave her documents for her whole extended family, and they were able to avoid deportation and get out of the ghetto. She learned many, many years later, when she wanted to thank him, that he was denounced and executed by the Germans for his
Yeah.
work helping Jews. So you don't know.
But that's it. Because this it's such a complex history, really, and anyone. I mean, I've been writing for I don't know 9 years now, and I still know nothing really, and I do this daily, and I still know nothing. I still come across news stories, or some very horrific, some just beautiful as well. So, and anyone who claims, well, one expert on Holocaust, I know that they're not, because no one is. Uh,
No experts, no experts would even say that.
yeah,
They,
exactly.
yeah,
And
go ahead.
and there shouldn't be any experts either, because really, when you think of it, it's just we just have to get on and learn as we go along as well. And it's now, unfortunately, this whole what I don't like is this never again motto. It's been used a bit
It's
too
ridiculous.
often, too
Yeah.
easily. It says, well, I've said it now, I can move on.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what I often see. I often say, "Oh, never again." So, well, sometimes
What
the
does
question,
that
well,
mean?
yeah,
Right?
That's not the kind. What do you mean with that? Never again, and
And
what?
never forget. It doesn't, they don't mean anything. They're, to my mind, they're like sociocultural bumper stickers.
Yeah,
You spew forward some soundbite and feel like you've done the right thing, when in fact you have not done the right thing. Um, and how do you say never again when all of those years, what was going on in Africa? Never again for who?
yeah,
What about all the
exactly.
other? Okay, so right, we have so many points to share, and I'm so grateful to be able to do it. Let me get back to growing up in a heavily Jewish community, um, and hearing survivors' stories. There were two kinds of survivors. My friends' parents were two kinds. One, they talked about it all the time. Their homes, the heavy European furniture and the drapes were always closed. The Holocaust and Hitler were part of their existence. The other kinds of Jewish survivor homes were as American as you can get. It was modern 50s, mid-century modern furniture. They're the ones with the ping pong tables and the basement and the swimming pools. And these parents did not want the curse of the Third Reich to touch their children.
Hmm.
So never spoken of. And the kids knew somewhere there was a heavy secret, but they were regular American kids. And so the two households were manifestations of two completely different points of view. When I was growing up, my grandmother and I would sit together in a big chair, and we would go through her photo albums with all of our relatives in Vilna who died. So we weren't doing Cinderella and Snow White. I wanted to see these photo albums. I wanted to walk into those images and walk down those cobblestone streets and hold my Auntie Rivka's hand. Those people were so alive for me. And when I was very little, maybe 4, she would show me a picture. I would show me Auntie Rivka because she was beautiful and she was wearing a fur coat and she was elegant. And my grandmother would tell me all about her baby sister. She would tell me I reminded her of her baby sister, Rivka. And so I knew that I was living a life that Auntie Rivka did not get to live.
Mm.
And that when my grandmother looked at me, she saw going back to when they were a happy family with a future. And so there was always parallel perceptions. No one ever said you need to live a good life because your family got wiped out, was never said. My grandmother said, "You look like my baby sister Rivka." And she loved to dance, and I loved to dance. She loved to sing, and I loved to sing. And what many of us in this generation grew up with was that if any of us had a skill, like maybe somebody was extremely artistic, their parents or their grandparents would say, "Oh, you are just like my brother Izzy. Such an artist was he." And then, well, what happened? Well, the Nazis got him. And
Yeah.
so that refrain, the Nazis got him, was in our brains, in our souls, and had much more meaning than these little throwaway, like I say, bumper stickers of never forget.
Yeah.
Are you are you doing anything to substantiate that, or are you just saying it? It's meaningless.
Yeah.
And so I grew up knowing that my family was wiped out. And when I got a little older, maybe 6, 7, I would say to my grandmother, why didn't their neighbors help them? Why didn't anyone help them as they're being dragged away? As their neighbors were then moving into our family's homes and using our family's silverware and bedding. Why didn't anyone help them? And my grandmother, always with some tears, would just go, I don't know. I don't know. And that grabbed me, that somehow I needed to not let anybody be bullied. And so in elementary school, I was the person that was always sticking up for the bully,
Yeah.
for the victim of the bully.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. And
No.
then when we had, my generation was blessed with causes. We had Vietnam, which wasn't a war, but people were dying in it. We had the second wave of the women's movement. We had civil rights. There were so many fronts on which we had to fight, and not give little flip mottos. We had to actually be out there, and we were. And so I was committed to civil rights from earliest childhood before I knew there were words for it.
Yeah, yeah. No, but that's just so important because we all, at the end of the day, we're this is one race. It's the human race. We're all the same. We all need food. We all need water. We all need air. There's no difference there for anyone. But well, as going back there, you grew up in Michigan, Detroit, is it? So the stores of Henry Ford would have gone around as well, then I
Oh yeah,
suppose.
yeah. Nobody drove a Ford,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
outside of Detroit, nobody knew about it.
yeah,
People are still surprised. Part of my presentation includes a slide where I show one of Hitler's offices, and on the wall is a full-length oil painting of Henry Ford wearing the sash and the Medal of Honor that's only given to foreigners
yeah,
that are not Germans. They were tight. We had Father Coughlin, who was before my time. He was a Ford crony. He had the Shrine of the Little Flower Church, not far from where the Jewish community lived. And he was an overt and vicious anti Semite priest. And he had a radio show on Sunday that 30 million people listened to.
yeah. And well, he's for anyone who has interest in history, he's a well-known character.
Yeah, but
I
if you're
suppose.
not interested, nobody knows about him.
No, but there have been a few. There's been a few Irish as well as Lord Haw, for instance. He was a propaganda tool for the Nazis as well. So, but another thing that and I'm not 100% sure if this is correct or not, but I believe it is that Henry Ford would send Hitler a check of about $50,000 on his birthday every year as well. So a lot of people don't know that. That
I
brings me.
haven't heard that, but
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I recently came across that. I haven't been able to verify it, but it wouldn't surprise me. No, that brings me to another question, though. When you say no one drives a Ford, and people ask me, well, what should I do uh, uh, companies had been involved in the Holocaust, and I think, well, really, there have been quite a lot, and there's still some of them are still
Oh yeah.
operating, maybe under different names. For instance, Bayer,
Oh
the
yeah.
medicines, you probably have paracetamols at some or whatever at some stage. So it's very difficult to say, well, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, and I think
Yeah.
we kind of have to maybe not forget about it, but maybe come up with a clever way of
Yes.
dealing with that. Because if you really start boycotting or banning all of that stuff, it's going to be you're going to limit
Well,
yourself to some state.
yes. And it has, of course, application today.
Yeah,
Sadly, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
yeah,
And for all of us who in our early years couldn't understand how Germany, this land of culture and music and poetry and so forth, could become an engine of death, we couldn't understand it. But now today we can. Now we can look at the United States and understand exactly how that can happen. And we think about, well, what can I do? Well, can I boycott Facebook? Can I boycott? Well, your little boycott isn't going to make any difference at all. But when we were growing up, we consciously did not buy German. It was almost like find something you can do to at least show that you are not going to support them. So our whole community's not buying anything German had no impact retroactively, but it was a solidarity thing that reminded us
yeah.
of that we needed to stay alert.
My I think my biggest weapon is just talk, tell the stories. I think that's the
Well,
best way of doing it. Now we're running out of time, so and
let me
just
show you
before,
my books.
yeah,
Can I show
exactly.
you?
That's about to say that.
Is this backwards or
No, no,
forward?
that's fine. That's victory. That's the little girl we talk about, Miriam.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is a victory for Miriam. I wrote it with Miriam Brisk, who was a little girl who, along with her parents, escaped the ghetto, a horrific escape, and landed in the forest and spent 18 months with the partisans. Miriam's father was a surgeon, and he built, with the help of the other people in the forest, he built an outdoor surgery center
All right.
where partisans came. And Miriam, even though she was 7, 8, and 9, helped. She had her own responsibilities. She grew up to become a PhD scientist, world renowned, an amazing woman. This cover was designed by my granddaughter when she was 12. When she heard Miriam's story, she had kind of a David and Goliath impression,
Yeah.
and she designed the cover. My other book under my name, because I've ghostwritten, is Women of Valor, Polish Jewish resistors to the Third Reich. And in it, I interview 4 women, including Miriam, 4 women that I became extremely close with about their activities as resistors. Their stories are true, they're in their own voice. And much as I don't necessarily want to support Amazon, they are available via Amazon and by special order through Barnes and Noble and independent bookstores. So I hope anyone who's interested will
Look at you.
patronize an independent
Okay.
bookstore.
Joanne,
Um,
it was lovely talking to you.
thank you.
I'm sure we'll talk again at some stage.
My
And
pleasure.
yes, hopefully the books will go well for you. And yeah, they're fascinating stories. So
Thank you.
thank you for
Anyone
this.
is interested in having me do a Zoom presentation, I would be grateful for the opportunity to do
I
that.
will mention it.
Thank you. Good luck to you. Best wishes. Be
Thanks.
well.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.